Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our third virtual Friday morning business breakfast talk in our ongoing series of events, Nexicom Presents Fourth Line Theatre at Home. These sessions will be an excellent opportunity to get to know local political and business leaders and the inner workings of their sectors. I am so excited to spend some time today with Diane Therrien, who's the mayor of Peterborough. But before I do, I just have a few things to note. First off, I want to acknowledge our amazing longtime sponsors at Fourth Line Theatre, Nexicom, for their continued support and innovative approach to sponsorship during these unprecedented times. I'd also like to acknowledge Exit Realty LiftLock, our major sponsor. Thank you to both. Some housekeeping notes. I just want to let you all know that your audio is muted. So if you'd like to submit a question to Diane or myself, we'd be happy to answer your questions during the Q&A session after our talk. To ask a question, simply click on the Q&A button on the menu at the bottom of your Zoom video window. You can type questions and our host will collect them and give them to us during the Q&A session. I also wanted to let you know that I'm broadcasting live from our farmers market out at the farm. So if there's ambient noise around, that's what's going on. We are now open every Friday from 8 a.m. till 12. So come out if you want to. We have amazing vendors out here. Also be aware that if you mistakenly exit the webinar or have any technical difficulties, you can simply re-enter the webinar by clicking on the Zoom invite link we sent you earlier today, and you'll get right back in the same way you arrived. And be sure to follow our social media e-blasts and visit our website to register for upcoming virtual events. And on next Friday, on the 17th of July, I'll be sitting down with one of Canada's most respected financial investment professionals, Andrew Pyle, portfolio and branch manager of the Pyle Group Scotia Wealth Management, for a business breakfast chat at 8 a.m. You can also visit Fourth Line Theatre's YouTube channel to view all of our virtual events and after the live presentation is completed. And now I would like to introduce and welcome Diane Therrien. Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, how are you? Can you hear me? Can you hear me talking? Diane, can you hear me at all?
Hello, Kim?
Yeah, can you hear me? You can't hear me. Lindy, Lindy's our moderator. I'm gonna pop back in and out and see if it's me. So I'll hop in and out and see. Lindy, can you hear me? Hello?
I can. Hello. Sorry. So it's, I think, on Diane's end. So she looks like she's just leaving and coming back.
Okay, great.
So
Hi,
if everyone can hold for a couple minutes, I'll put the sign back up.
No. Okay, that's great. Okay.
Okay. Just hold for a few moments, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
What, am I back?
Yeah, I think you're back. Hello, can you hear me?
Hey, sorry, yeah, my internet, I thought you were frozen and then I got kicked off. I should be good now, hopefully. Sorry.
Okay. No, it's this is 2020.
This is the day and age, yeah. Every day is a new adventure.
Exactly. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining me, Mayor Therrien.
Yeah, thank you.
Are you okay if I call you Diane? I
please.
Can't imagine I'll use your name a ton throughout it, but I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
And or do you feel I should use the more formal Your Worship?
No, I try to avoid that one at all costs. Yeah.
Okay, well, welcome. Thank you so much. So you're the mayor of Peterborough.
That is correct, yeah.
And I have so many questions. My first question is, where are you streaming from right now?
I'm in my kitchen at home and I'll be heading down to the office after this. Been doing a bit of the splits between home and office. City Hall's still closed to the public. So, and there's a lot of folks working from home. So it's actually really quiet and productive to be there because you can have the whole place to yourself pretty much.
And I'm so curious about just on that vein, when will sort of city services like City Hall open up to the public again? What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we're aiming for like August for City Hall to reopen. A lot of services by appointment. We're in the process of making sure there's proper, plexiglass and PPE and those kinds of things in place for folks that have to deal with the public, in permitting and those and the tax office and those kinds of things. So City Hall will be in August, early August, I believe, and other services we're kind of rolling out depending on the week and depending on as well what the province and health units guidelines are saying.
So we'll talk. We will for sure talk COVID, because I guess it will be the defining potentially part of your this first term that you have, I would think.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's put a pin in COVID.
Okay.
And I'm so curious about where you're originally from and where you were raised.
Yeah, so I grew up in Mississauga and then Hamilton, and so was there for through the kind of the boom of the suburbs, as it were, and moved to Peterborough in 2010 actually to come to do a master's at Trent, and had always planned on going back to Hamilton after. I love Hamilton, I still do. It's a great city. But I fell in love with Peterborough, and it really just felt like home. So I'm still here.
Yeah. And in your family upbringing, were your parents or family members politically minded? Were they like social activists? Like, where does your interest in those things come from?
Yeah, no, it's funny. Not really a political family. I mean, my dad did some stuff back, when he was younger, but not when I was a kid. So it stemmed from a few things, I think. Being a bit of a rebellious kid in Catholic school was one. I went to McMaster and I got really involved in the different sort of student groups and communities in Hamilton there. But I never really thought about it was never an aspiration to be like in politics. And when I came to Peterborough, I used to start kind of paying attention to stuff that's going on, and got involved really when the whole Parkway debate was reignited back in 2012 or whenever it was. And I started going to council meetings just as an observer, and just kind of thought that there was a lack of sort of representation of a lot of voices around that table. And so I started thinking about running for city council, which is what I did in 2014 for the downtown area. And then here we are.
What did you do your degree in at Mac?
At McMaster, it was history and peace studies with a minor in Indigenous studies.
So you've always had, or you have a social justice bent. I'm curious, as you talk about yourself as a rebellious Catholic school kid, but there is a real social justice piece to a lot of Catholic high school education that we don't necessarily find in the public system. Would you agree with that?
Maybe now. I don't know so much when I was in high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So, but where do you trace that interest in social justice and Indigenous justice issues? Where do you trace that to?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I just trace it to, this thought that so I remember distinctly in a couple of, probably in, the 7th or 8th grade when, you're getting taught about, you just treat everybody fair and, everybody deserves to be treated equally. But then we had some teachers that had, quite sort of homophobic tendencies or, so I was like, that doesn't make sense to me. You're saying treat everybody fair, but for some reason you're saying gay people shouldn't be treated the same. So how is that, how does that make any sense? So that, started kind of young and then that's sort of just something that I've kind of always had in the back of my mind, like everybody deserves equal rights and we need to be fighting for a better world for everybody.
Right. And I'm curious, you come to Trent to do a master's and you could have just been like put my head down, do my master's, get TA, maybe then think about where I might go and do a PhD or go into the workforce or whatever would be the next thought. What makes you go to your first council meeting?
Yeah, I mean, again, partly the issue, of the parkway that had come up, and that was something that I did a lot of research about and just thought was, I mean, never mind the environmental, the piece to it, the financial cost of it was kind of mind-boggling, and then you go to those meetings, and those were big public meetings under the Planning Act. So there was hundreds of people. And then, out of curiosity, you kind of realize municipal government's the closest level of government, but it's often the one that people pay the least attention to, quite frankly. But it's the most tangible, right? It's, your sidewalks, your garbage collection, your drinking water, your snow clearing, roads, all that kind of stuff. So when you start kind of going to meetings, you're kind of like, oh, they're making decisions that are impacting us on a day-to-day basis that a lot of people don't really pay attention to. It's not the same it doesn't get the same level of, media attention that provincial and federal and party politics does, right? So, there'd be times where I'd be the only one in the meeting. I know a lot of people do stream it online. You can watch them at home as well, but there is something about going in person, which of course you can't do right now. But I think, and I always encourage people to come to those meetings. You can check the agenda. If there's something online there's something on the agenda that is of interest to you, just come check it out. It's not like you have to stay for the whole meeting. You can come and go.
And
yeah, anyways, that's a long-winded answer, but
no, that was fascinating. Long-winded answers give me lots of questions to ask and explore. Do you remember the first time you spoke up at a council meeting?
Yeah, it was during those Parkway debates. I have the video somewhere, but I did a bunch of research and wrote a speech and wore a suit and kind of went up there and did my thing, and then I started going, and I spoke to. I would kind of just. I also during before I was on council. But around 2013, I was working for the Peterborough Poverty Reduction Network. And so through that employment, I also had the opportunity to speak to council as a delegation a few times about issues around housing affordability and food security and those kinds of things. So it can be a little bit unnerving at first, but you sort of kind of get used to it.
Right. And was it you that first thought you'd run for council, or did someone say to you, you know what, you'd be really good on council?
Yeah, it's interesting because you hear a lot about how women in particular need so many people to tell them that they'd be good before they actually consider doing it. I basically was just like, I could do that, watching the meetings, and I was just like, I could do this job, and I thought I might be able to do it a little bit in a bit of a different way than some of the folks around that table. And there was a couple, of representatives at that time who I didn't feel really seemed to care about their constituents. I remember seeing some of them roll their eyes when some delegations would come up to present and kind of zone out. And I just thought, you're there to represent everyone, even if you don't agree with them, or even if you don't like them. You can't be disrespecting people. So so that sort of, I just kind of thought about it and then put my mind to it, and had a great group of people help me campaign, and I won. So
yeah. So when you announced to, say, family and friends, did they all go, that makes total sense, or everybody was like, that's crazy, it will be ugly? What was the response?
It was a bit of both. People, they were like, aren't you the one that's always complaining about stuff the government's doing? But there were some that were like, yeah, that makes sense. You take that energy and try to put it into, positive change. So it was a bit of a mixed bag, but everybody was supportive.
Right. Yeah. And to run a campaign, I'm just so curious, for council in a downtown, it was downtown ward, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
How much does it cost you? What does it take? What is that?
Yeah, I mean, so it depends. You have a limit. It costs, you have to pay a $50 filing fee to file your papers. So that's just kind of standard. And then it's, you have a maximum amount that you're able to spend. It's calculated based on the population of the ward. I think for my council run, I probably spent around 8,000, I want to say. Again, you don't have to spend that much. You can spend up to the max, right? I did a lot of fundraising. The biggest chunk of that is lawn signs, which are really expensive. And there's debate about lawn signs and whether they should be used or gotten rid of or whatever. But and then there's printing flyers, and if you have a website and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's the mayoral campaigns, that was a whole different beast. That's a lot more money and a lot more logistics.
And with your council run, I ran a downtown council run for a friend years ago in Peterborough, and I think he came in a very distant fourth. So I remember getting this lawn signs and getting donations, but you clearly won. How, like, did you know you were going to win, is my first question? Like, were you pretty confident you were going to win a seat?
That's a good question. When I started, people, again, I had only been in Peterborough for like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of people that were like, you're never going to win. Nobody knows who you are. Honestly, knocking on doors is the way that you win a campaign. And so I knocked on doors like every evening and weekend through July, August, September, October, and just talked to people. And I had, when I went to, I went to neighborhoods where people said, nobody's ever come to our door before. And I had people say like, oh, don't bother going to that street. Like some of the lower income areas, people there don't vote. Don't waste your time. And I thought, well, maybe they don't vote because they haven't had anybody like provide them a reason to actually vote. So so I knocked on door in town ward, like the downtown area. I knocked on pretty much every street during that campaign. And I had people help me. I never really, I went along sometimes, but often I had a friend, and we'd either kind of leapfrog or take one side of the street just so that you have somebody to, keep an eye out. And if you kind of get stuck talking to somebody, they can come help you move along, sort of thing.
And did you ever have a bad incident, or is that just expected to have a bad incident?
Yeah, you have to kind of be prepared for everything. I did have somebody say like, you're gonna get a naked guy, and we got one. But I mean, there was a few people that kind of like went on a tangent about like the Russians, people that maybe weren't, had some other stuff going on.
Right.
But I think the thing is, when you run a campaign, when you're a new person and you don't really have a record to run on. Mm-hmm. So it's different when you go, like, if you run for re-election, because people are like, you voted this way and I didn't like it, but when you're brand new, people are kind of just interested to kind of get to know you. There was a little bit of like, oh, you're too young, like who, kind of thing. But I was like, well, you just have to be 18, and I was 28. So, it's just, again, it's a different, I think, visual than people are used to seeing for politics, particularly municipal politics.
Right. And besides my question is, what was the most surprising thing of knocking on doors besides the naked guy? What was the most surprising thing to come out of it in terms of people's questions and concerns?
Yeah, I think for that round, I think the most surprising thing was just like how much people do care. Because elections in Canada have a low voter turnout. Municipal elections in particular, it's like less than 45% generally. And there would be some people that were like, oh, municipal, like I don't vote or whatever. But then you kind of start talking about, well, what's important to you? And then you start, you kind of get this conversation going, and you're like, okay, well, that's actually your municipal government. And, oh, okay. And then, there's a couple people that, had said, okay, well, we're going to vote for the first time. And that time and this time you were able to vote online, which helps
Oh,
accessibility in some cases. There's advanced polling, which helps in, in a lot of cases. So I think, yeah, the surprising thing was just like, when you reach out to people, they have a lot that they want to talk about.
wow, that's so interesting to me. And did you win by a lot? I don't know. I didn't even look at this.
Yeah, the way that it works is, so there's two counselors per ward. So I came in second. Dean Pappas is a longtime town ward counselor, and I think he was ahead of me by like 170 votes. And then it was me, and then the third place person was like 1,000 votes behind or something.
Oh yeah, so
Like, it was pretty
win,
significant margin. Yeah, for sure.
for sure. Amazing.
And it was just I had a great team of people helping me out. I hustled, again, the door knocking is the key piece. Yeah, and I mean, the downtown ward also is, tends to be a bit younger, more progressive, that kind of thing. So people were, and I had graduated Trent not that long ago. I was still TAing a couple courses. So I knew a lot of students in the downtown area as well, who, again, students have this reputation of not voting and that kind of thing, but we're able to get out some of those younger folks. Miriam Monsef was also running for mayor in that election, which also kind of pulled, I think, some of the younger vote, because you had some of these younger candidates running. So.
And when you say your team, like how many people are we talking on that first?
So on that first campaign, it was a lot less formal than the mayoral run. So my partner at the time did a lot of the logistical work. I had about 6 key door knocking people that would come with me, probably another 4 people that were kind of like flyer, like they didn't want to talk to anybody, but they were good just putting up door knockers or dropping off flyers. I had a couple people that I hadn't met before that just reached out and wanted to help with website, social media, finance kind of stuff. So I would say probably that one in total, like 10 to 15 sort of key. That includes, again, the door knocking people that was like really what they did. And yeah.
I have so many questions for you. I'm going to run out of time here, but I wanted to ask you, when you were knocking on doors, we have to move on to being mayor, but I'm always.
No, counselor was so much less stressful in hindsight.
I have no doubt. I always, at the beginning of these, I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to talk to them about. And then at this point.
And then you're like, we need 2 hours. Yeah.
Exactly. So when you're knocking on doors, I'm curious if people get federal, provincial, and municipal government, what they handle mixed up.
Yeah, for sure. Like people would be like, oh, what party are you with? And, I was like, well, actually there's no parties municipally in Ontario. Not that some people aren't more aligned with, some than others, but you're not supposed to be, you're supposed to just be voting in the best interest of your constituency and your community. But yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that happens still. People, I mean, we'll get to COVID, but people, at the beginning were emailing me saying like, why don't we have a curfew and a court? And I was like, I don't have the power. People think I have a lot more power than I do, quite frankly. Right. But municipally, yeah, like people would, and I think it's very common, right? Like it's hard to kind of know all the differences between who's responsible for what. And there's some stuff that overlaps. We get funding from the province and the feds for some infrastructure projects, but we're responsible for that. Some of that stuff changes out in the county or on First Nations. Like it's all kind of different, right? When we used to have classes and stuff come to City Hall, or I would go visit schools, we would do the exercise where like, can we name 10 things that the municipality is responsible for? And these kids know probably more than most adults, I think. But like the library, arenas, parks, like a lot of it's the stuff that you can see in your community, right? So that's kind of a way that's helpful to explain it to kids, but it makes sense to people of all ages, right? Because senior levels, it's much more like the policy stuff, the big, like the healthcare education, like the big things. But here it's like this hydro pole outside and the sidewalk and the road that I can see, and the buses that go by. So, but yeah, people kind of, I think there's just so much going on. It's hard to know. And again, municipal government tends to be the one that you don't really notice until like your garbage doesn't get picked up or your snow doesn't get cleared. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, what's going on? But it's easy to not like take it for granted, but just not really think too much about it because it's so ingrained in your day-to-day life. You turn on the tap and clean water comes out.
It's like until it doesn't function well.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like,
Yeah.
it's like if your computer doesn't, like, my husband works in IT. Nobody ever calls the helpline when their computer's working well.
Exactly.
When there's trouble, somebody's screaming at
There
you.
you go. Yeah.
Well, okay. So being a counselor, full-time job, not full-time job.
Well, it's
Maybe I say supposed to be, not.
yeah, it's supposed to be part-time. It pays part-time, and I was working other jobs at the time, and like a lot of counselors now do have other full-time employment. It's one of those jobs though that's kind of like you can put 60 hours in or you can put 10. It sort of depends on how seriously you take it. And so, you know, part of the reason I did well was I had heard from people that some of their previous representatives like never responded to them or weren't ever at community events. So it really depends, but it is supposed to be a part-time job.
So where did you find the sweet spot, or where did you end up living in that 10 to 60 range?
Yeah, it also depended on the week. I mean, I am the kind of person that like I try to go out to as many events as I can, and you know, I'm try to be very active in the community anyways. So, you know, I was kind of doing the millennial hustle at that time. I was working with the Poverty Reduction Network, which was a 21-hour a week contract. I was TAing, and I was also working with the QP local up at Trent that represents contract faculty and graduate student workers. So between all, I basically had four part-time jobs at the time. So which was good for like an ADD kid like me to kind of be bouncing around, you know, and have different things to challenge in different ways. But yeah, some weeks it was like 60. It tended to quieted down. That's grammatically doesn't make sense. It sort of ebbed and flowed in terms of like busyness. So like during Christmas, most people are kind of like council's on a break. Most people are busy doing family stuff and the emails and stuff die down. I found that also in the summer, you know, people are otherwise busy. So those were kind of quieter times. But then if there was a big contentious issue, then all of a sudden like it heightens. So it was like people will say like for this job, like what does the day in the life of the mayor look like? And it's kind of like there isn't a template. Every day is very different.
Right.
And it's the same for council too. It depends on the issues of what's going on. It depends on, it depends on what's on the agenda. If you have other committee or board meetings. So there's a lot of variables.
Right. And you can say that you don't want to answer this and that people can go look it up, I'm sure. But what do counselors make in Peterborough right now?
So right now, it's around 30,000, I think. Okay. Yeah. It's not, you know, it's not nothing.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, I had no idea. It's so interesting because every time anyone ever votes themselves a raise, and I'll chat with you about how you know, do that, and then how many evil emails you get. But it does sound like there's a lot of work, and Peterborough is big, right? What is the population of Peterborough right now?
Around 85,000 for the city. Yeah.
Okay, so I have to jump into mayor. I am literally going to run out of time with you. But so you could have kind of just coasted, right? Like you're doing your first 4 years as a counselor. You could have probably easily got reelected for a second. Yeah. Why on earth would anyone want to be the mayor of Peterborough?
I know, I ask myself that sometimes. That's a good question. I mean, so it was my term on council was, you know, I really enjoyed it. It was frustrating at times because there was a bit of a ideological divide between the former mayor and, you know, myself and some others. And then when, you know, it was like talking about plans for re-election and there was a lot of folks talking about who's going to run for mayor. Like people were looking for a progressive to kind of challenge this sort of status quo. And you know, I kind of said, listen, I'm happy to do another term as counselor. and then I mean, I'm a believer in term limits as well. Like, I think there should be like a 2-term max, but I'm an anomaly on that, I think. Anyways, it was kind of like, I was like, if there's a progressive who has a good shot at winning that wants to do it, I'll support them 100% to run for mayor. It's not a job that a lot of people wanted to take on.
Yeah.
And so, I talked to a lot of people about it, and I thought, well, okay, I'll do this. I'll do a run at it and see what's going on. Because there was a lot of, there had been a lot of controversy in the last term of council, and there was, a lot of sort of, there were a lot of kind of hard feelings in a lot of different ways. So
I'm curious, I'll just jump in with that. So I just moved back to Peterborough after 19 years. But from Toronto, and of course I'm here at Fourth Line every summer. I live in Peterborough every summer for the last 20 years. The things I know about are this taxi Uber thing, and then the police services board. Are those real big controversies, or is that not true?
So yeah.
Oh, did you freeze again?
Oh, am I here?
You're here now.
Okay. So, I mean, the police board issue was a bit of a, I have to be diplomatic, but.
And only answer what you feel comfortable answering.
Yeah, no, and I'm comfortable. I'm trying not to drop an F-bomb.
I don't care if you do, but so tell me what the issue that would cause an F-bomb is with that.
Oh, I was just going to say the police board issue was a cluster F-bomb.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
So, so everything that went down with the police board, and not to get into, it in too much detail, but it portrayed Peterborough in a really bad light nationally, to have, a representative, the mayor kind of get kicked off the board, have all this legal stuff, and then want to put himself back on the board. And there's, the way that the police boards work are really complicated. Provincially, it's a provincial act, right? That they operate under. Anyways, the taxi Uber thing's a bit different. I mean, we do need a ride sharing service in Peterborough. We have a local company ready to go. I've talked to Uber, I've talked to Lyft. Neither of them are ready to come to Peterborough at this time, but there should have been a ride sharing bylaw a while ago. Again, I've been trying to work on that since I've been in office, and it takes a while. So I'm not saying anything about why there wasn't one before. Okay. But there also, there was, the PDI thing was a big issue. The sale of our local distribution company to Hydro One, that was a huge issue. So there was a lot of things that went down in the last term of council, that sort of led to a bit of frustration, I think, with the former mayor. And there's always going to be that if somebody's been in for 2 terms. There's people that are frustrated with me, and I've only been in for 2 years, right? So it doesn't matter. Anybody that's ever been in has, every decision you make, people are going to like and people are going to hate it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, you throw your hat in the ring, and so just in terms of the same kinds of questions, like, did you think you were going to win? Were you pretty confident?
I wouldn't have done it if I didn't think I had a chance at winning.
Okay. And so it's not town ward. It's not, you don't have the ability in the city of 85,000 to knock on every door. Just tell me sort of an overview of how you ran your campaign and why you think you won.
So I had an amazing team. My campaign manager was like phenomenal. And he, so for this campaign, I had a team that was like closer to probably 40 or 50 people. Either like the direct, like I had a finance person, a volunteer coordinator, a social media coordinator, like very specific roles, and a campaign manager who took a leave from work, unpaid leave, to help me do that. So wow. Yeah, so that was amazing, and I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have won without him, for sure. And he basically, you can't knock on every door, but they did a lot of like analysis and looking at stuff, and basically we're like, okay, we're going to focus on the North End rather than the West End, for example, or we're going to focus on these neighborhoods because they're, you know, they're probably have more hope there, kind of thing.
So that's what I want to ask quickly. Because, you know, I'm thinking about with Hillary in 2016, you know, there were areas she thought were shoe-ins, so she didn't go there. And so I'm curious, do you go to the shoe-in areas, or do you actually go to the areas you think you have no hope of? Because in fact, like, I'm curious what the thinking is on that.
Yeah. So like for example, I personally didn't do a lot of door knocking in the downtown area. I had volunteers that did, but because, you know, I'm pretty well known and I've been representing that ward, and people kind of know me, and I live downtown, so people see me and can talk to me. So the focus for me individually was to kind of go more to some of the neighborhoods that are either potential. There were some that like, I was like, I want to go to this neighborhood. And my campaign manager was like, you shouldn't, because they're not going to vote for you. And I remember going to one, and it was just like, yeah, he's right. Like every door, people were just kind of like, no, thanks. And I'm like, okay. So
I'm going to ask the question. You can say, I'm not going to say. What neighborhood was it?
It was a neighborhood in the West End of Peterborough.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
Which tends to, I mean, and again, they looked at not just the data from the municipal elections, but from provincial and federal. So that it was a specific kind of couple streets that goes heavy conservative. Just not my people, right?
Yeah. But ideologically different than you.
But again,
to move.
And the thing is, though, because there's not party politics in municipalities, it's like I have people that voted for me that vote conservative other ways, or liberal, or NDP, or Green, or Marxists, or whatever. So to me, it's that shouldn't matter. But anyways, it is like, especially like when it's this hot out and you're like knocking on doors, to have people just be like, no. And it's like, it can be kind of demoralizing.
And how much did it cost? How much? So you was like 8,000 to get counselorship. How much did it cost to become mayor?
So the mayoral campaign, the limit was around 55,000. And we spent, I'd have to check the records, but it was around 50, I think.
Wow. And where did all that money come from?
So I had a great fundraising team. We did a lot of, you know, there were people that were supportive. And the way that it works is like, you can take donations from anyone as long as they live in Ontario. Okay. And because the province had changed the Municipal Elections Act in between the last two elections, so like, you can't self-finance your campaign, which I couldn't do anyways, but
it precludes really rich people that 50,000 would be nothing for them, right?
Well, our previous, you know, the previous mayor had been very open about he had self-financed his two campaigns. So it does change the playing field a bit when you can't do that, and you also can no longer take money from unions or corporations, which I think makes sense too. Although there's ways people find around that, but. Anyways, all that to say, I wouldn't have been able to self-finance a campaign anyways. But I had a really great team of fundraisers. We did a lot of like kind of coffee, cheese, kind of meet and greets in people's backyards and kitchens. And then my campaign manager, whoever, would kind of then give a spiel at the end. And he was really,
pulled out the hat.
Really good about going around and like, your checkbook, oh, you need a pen, you know? And it's also like little, you know, people would be like, oh, well, I can only give, you know, $50. It's like, it adds up very quickly, you know?
Can someone else finance, like someone have written you a $50,000 check?
No, there's a limit on how much any individual, I think it's 1,200 for, I'm trying to remember if that's municipal or provincial, but anyways, there's a cap on what any one individual can donate to a candidate, as well as how much they can donate to different candidates in an election.
Okay. Did your family donate? I hope
they did. Yes,
because they're all live in Ontario. So
yeah.
And are there debates in a mayoral campaign?
Yeah, there were debates in the town ward one as well. But yeah, in the mayoral debate, in the mayoral campaign, there was a lot. There was probably 7.
Wow. And
Yeah.
how many candidates were in the field? Because in Toronto, there's sometimes over 100 people running for mayor.
Yeah. So there were 3, but then the third guy dropped out the last day that you could. So it ended up just being myself. It ended up just being 2 of us.
Okay. And what is debating like? Are you good at it?
I think so. It depends. Like they're hosted often by like the chamber or the Home Builders Association or like different organizations, and so you just kind of have to know your stuff and know also what you want to say. And I mean, I enjoy debating. It is kind of it's a bit tiring in that, like, if you go to a debate and there's only 20 people show up and you're kind of like, oh, I could be out knocking on doors, it's sort of the cost benefit, but you have to do it. And they are like good experience for sure.
Right. And do your team prep you, and do they talk about your hair and makeup and the clothes and all that stuff?
Yeah. I mean, we had a lot of inside jokes about like wondering if the, male candidates had, wardrobe consultants saying like, don't wear that, don't wear this, straighten your hair. But we had a good time doing that. But yeah, we did a lot of prep. So we would do kind of like mock debates. Here's some questions that you're likely to get, don't say so much, that, those kinds of things, which is hard when you're up there and you're not thinking about all of those. And I try to just kind of be genuine.
Right. And you and was he a good debater, the former mayor? Like, was it?
Yeah, I mean, he's a very smart guy. He knows his stuff. He had been in the position for 2 terms. So he, had a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge about that. So, none of it was easy.
It's interesting. I was just thinking, you guys were almost like a mini microcosm of Trump and Hillary, like the more progressive candidate and the older, more conservative candidate. And that's totally broad strokes. But was it ever ugly between you two, or do you have a mutual respect for each other?
I don't think it was ever ugly. I mean, I work really hard to get along with everybody that I work with, and it's not like I disagreed with him on everything. Like, we had common ground. I just didn't, there was a lot that I didn't necessarily agree with, and we just had very different sort of worldviews.
Yeah. And you won.
Yeah.
And where were you? Like, how does it work in municipal politics? Like, were you in a hotel room, going down to the ballroom and watching it on TV? Like, how does it work in Peterborough?
Well, it was weird because it was also, the polls they had issues with. So it was like prolonged by an hour, like when they were trying to get the results. So I remember I was so stressed because the day you do all this work and then and then it's election day and you can't really do anything but sit around and wait. Right. And so it's like, it's stressful, but you can't do anything. Like, normally when you're stressed out, you can go like knock on doors or do this, but you're not allowed to do any of that. So we had booked the Nexicom studio and show place for that. And I was kind of at home with my family waiting for these results to come in. And then I was backstage and my manager came in and he's like, "You won." And I was just like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, it's you." And it was all kind of a blur. So I went out and gave my little speech, and I didn't know the margin. Like, I didn't really know any of the numbers or anything. I just kind of went out and did that. And then, yeah.
Well, you really have to trust your campaign manager to have told you the truth.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
And was there a blue speech and a yellow speech written, like a concession and a victory?
Yeah, there was. Yeah, for sure.
And what was the margin ultimately?
It was like 68 to 30. Like, it was significant. Yeah, 68 to 32.
All right. And so you give your speech, and then is there a moment where you go, "Holy crap," or "Holy F, now I'm the mayor of Peterborough"?
Yeah. Like, it was, I mean, that night was really kind of, there were so many people and everybody was happy. And so you weren't really thinking about like, okay, what's to come. But then the next day it was like,
the adrenaline thing that night.
Yeah. And then the next day I was on Chex News at like 7 a.m. With a bit of a hangover. And so, and then it was kind of like, okay, then it sinks in, right? You're like, okay, I've got work to do. There's a bit of a transition period. Like we didn't officially take over till December.
Right.
So
Is it a
November
month? Is it 1 month?
yeah. So November was just kind of like learning files, getting into the office, doing all that kind of stuff. And just kind of prepping. So
For both council and then mayor, how steep is the learning curve?
yeah, that's a good question. It's pretty steep. I mean, I had been on council, so I was familiar with, a lot of those things. There's new committees and all of that kind of stuff. It also depends on how engaged you are with municipal politics before. So like I had been going and sitting in on council meetings for 2 years before I was even a councillor. So I knew how planning meetings worked. I knew what items come under general committee, joint services, blah, blah, blah. But it still is like, it's a lot. It's definitely a heavy workload for both councillors and mayor, for sure.
And is it a full-time position, mayor?
Mayor is, yes.
Yeah. So you have that great corner office. I worked in City Hall years ago in
Oh,
Peterborough.
right on.
I got in that the crow's nest or the attic
Oh,
space.
cool. Yeah.
But so that I'm just curious about what it was like in those first few weeks in December and then into January when you took over. Like what was it like?
Gosh, it seems so long ago now. It was good. It was, everybody at City Hall was really helpful. That we were kind of jumping into the budget process because normally our budget happens in November, but because of the election, it happened in January, but we got all the documents in December. So it was kind of just like, I was used to being a counselor, so it was just kind of like transitioning to a little bit of a bigger job. Just again, doing the walk-arounds, getting to know everybody. I had to find, an assistant, that kind of thing. And so it was a lot of like the logistical stuff.
Right. And so, the big challenge, I think, for all of us ratepayers and homeowners is taxes, right? Like, so I'm curious about, and I don't know, my first question is that the number one thing people scream at you about is their municipal tax bill?
Not these days. Sometimes.
Okay.
But I mean, I didn't campaign on freezing or lowering taxes. I never have. I campaigned on, spending our money in a smart way. But, I'm a believer that, paying taxes is how we keep our community and society running. And it's a necessary part of it. And I've never been one to talk about freezing or lowering taxes. It just, if you do that, then you just, and we've seen other municipalities get into these problems. Like they were like, did 0% Kawartha Lakes did 0% tax increases for years in the 90s. And then they have to increase it by 10 or 15% to cover their costs. So it just, it doesn't make sense. Nobody likes tax increases for sure. And we need to make sure that we're, cognizant of folks' ability to be able to pay that. And it does add up for people. So that 100%, I understand that. But it's one of those things that if we want to, I've made a comment once and the Conservatives got real mad about it, about, taxes being almost like a membership fee that you pay to participate and live in a community. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that, if you can't afford it, that you get kicked out. No. But, if we want to have roads and drinking water and, garbage collection and all those things, like we do need to pay for it, and arenas and libraries and splash pads. Right. So anyways, that's my little rant about taxes. But people get riled up about them, but I've had a couple people be like, I know you didn't run on lowering taxes and we recognize that there needs to be a tax increase. People don't want it to be 3 or 5%, but can we do something a bit lower? So that's coming up in the next couple. We have a finance meeting on Monday, actually.
So my question then about that is, do you imagine for the rest of our lives as homeowners, we should expect tax increases just as the reality of cost of living and everything costing more?
I mean, yeah, the cost of, so they'll tell you that cost of construction goes up, like 6 to 8% a year. The cost of, we know the cost of everything goes up, right? And so I do think, that taxes will have to go up each year. I know that's not ideal. I think until there's a way that the senior level of governments, actually, if the federal government, properly instituted, a wealth tax or corporate taxation that was fair and distributed that, in an equitable manner, then
Yeah.
we will be able to have some relief. But we're not seeing.
Yeah, wealth voting by the rich is a problem. Sorry for everyone who's really wealthy, but anyways, we won't get into that. So I know you have more of a social justice bent, probably more of a democratic socialist bent. I'm just putting those labels on you so you can say no. But have you ever surprised yourself by voting in a more conservative way? Or do you think your decision making is more conservative now that you have to navigate it for the whole city of Peterborough, or do you keep your more social justice bent?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the issue, I think. Like, again, I'm not really aligned with any sort of party or anything. Although I do tend to lean further left in a lot of ways, but it's not like I disagree with conservative principles about everything. I'm certainly not a social conservative. But yeah, I mean, you weigh out the benefits to the community, the cons to the community, what the residents are concerned about, but ultimately you have to make a decision that, is going to be of best benefit to the community in the long term, and not always just thinking about re-election, which too often happens with a lot of politicians.
Yeah, but how much do you think you have to think about re-election? Because I understand that so often the minute you're elected, and especially in larger spheres, there's a whole group of people who have to immediately switch over to, we've got to get ready for 4 years from now. But I'm curious about how much you have to, because a lot of decision making has to be made on what my constituents think of what I do so that I can get reelected because I am actually the best person to help.
Yeah. I mean, I try not to think, like, I find that mindset is damaging. Like, if people are always just acting like they're already in re-election mode, it takes away from, the quality of debates. If people are, trying to get on a soapbox and stuff. So I try not to think about that too much. And it's, it's 2 years away. So, like, who knows, right?
Yeah. And I'm curious if you've made decisions that have upset, or if any of your base, to use a terrible American word, has felt betrayed by any decisions you've had to make.
I'm sure they have. I mean, there was a decision at our planning committee just this week that I know some of my base was upset about, in terms of a new development that people feel is not, that people don't like. So, you're never going to make everybody happy, and that's the hard part of the job is knowing that no matter what you do, there's going to be people that are upset about it. But again, it's like, what's in the best interest of the community long term? What's going to make sense by the time I'm done with politics? You want to make decisions that you can stand behind.
How stressful is the job?
It's very stressful, for sure. I mean,
And prior to COVID.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. It's stressful. It was stressful before COVID. It had been stressful during COVID, for sure, when you're trying to figure out how to make sure that health and safety is a priority, but also balancing all the other needs of the community.
Yeah. And how do you manage stress? Like, do you have things that you do for fun? Like, is that even a possibility with the job?
I've been trying to be better about taking that time for sort of self-care, and take the dogs for a walk, get out into the park, just ignore the phone, for a couple hours on the weekend and stuff. So
how many hours a week do you work if you were going to take the 52 weeks?
I mean, again, depends on the week, but it's like emails come in and phone calls at all hours. So I try to be better about like not checking the phone after like 10 p.m. You know, if there's an emergency, then people have my personal cell phone, you know, that kind of thing. But it's basically you're on all the time. And even when you're like walking the dogs, people are like, oh, hey, I want to talk to you about this. So this is where the mask wearing comes in handy at the grocery store. I wear my mask and nobody knows who I am.
Yeah, that's been happening with me actually too. I have to say to people, it's Kim Blackwell. I wear my glasses and my black mask. What are you particularly proud of in the first 18 months, almost 2 years of your tenure?
I mean, we've done a lot of good work around community building. So for example, this was the second year on National Indigenous Peoples Day, we raised the Mississauga flag, which hadn't been done before. You know, we've had a couple of council sort of not quite retreats, but like team building sessions to try to, you know, get people on the same page to work together for those common goals. We're making progress on, you know, some of the cycling infrastructure and some of, you know, there's a lot going on, and there's still been a lot despite COVID that we've been working on that we need to kind of give kudos to staff and everybody for as well.
And with COVID, I guess my question is how dire is it financially?
It's bad. So it's bad for everybody across the country, really. And, you know, because we've had, you know, expenses, but we've also had lost revenues because facilities have been closed and all of that. So, you know, the projections that staff had, and we have another report coming to council to committee on Monday with a second update. But a couple, I guess it was back in May, the projection was already like close to $7 million of lost revenue, or like of budgetary implications. So it's been pretty bad. I know that the province is trying to negotiate with the feds for a relief package for municipalities. So
yeah, and there'll have to be something. I mean, we will all have to pay for this for a decade. I mean, nobody's fault. It is the reality that it is. So tell me what those early days of COVID in March was like. Like, did you get a call from somebody who says, we got to shut down City Hall? Like, how did it all happen?
Yeah, it all happened really quickly. I mean, we were kind of monitoring the situation, and we had a staff meeting about it on the week of, I guess it was like the 13th. Mm-hmm. And on the Friday, I guess it was the Thursday, we had this meeting, and I said, we're going to have to shut down facilities. Like, I'd rather be proactive and do it. So then on the Friday, we made that announcement and canceled all the March break summer camps and that kind of thing. And then the following week, and I was supposed to be on vacation. I was supposed to go to Mexico at that time, but that didn't.
I was in Mexico when that happened.
I was like, I don't think we should book our Airbnbs because I don't think that this is going to happen. Anyways, and then we shut down things, and then the next week it was like we have to declare a state of emergency, which doesn't need council approval. It was kind of, you know, my call, and so it all happened really, really quickly.
And has there ever been a time in the middle of COVID that you're like, I wish I didn't have this job? Or do you just sort of, well, yeah, that's my question.
No, well, maybe at like fleeting moments, but it's been like, you know, we have a great team, you know, we're not in it alone. Like, I am in regular communication with a lot of the other mayors in Eastern Ontario in particular about what things look like, what they're doing, you know. The health unit's been great. Dr. Salvatierra has been awesome. So, you know, it's about kind of just stepping up when the community needs you to step up.
Yeah. What kind of a leader would you describe yourself as?
A tired one. No, I'm just kidding. I think that's just right now. But I mean, I think I try to be one that is, you know, collaborative and responsive. And, you know, that, again, tries to put, you know, community well-being above personal ideology.
Yeah, it's 9 o'clock. Can I go till 9:07 with you? Because we still have to ask questions because we started a little bit late. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I
just wanted to ask before turn it over to Lindy right afterwards. How does the division of labor happen between the mayor and the CAO, the chief administrative officer of the city?
Yeah, so I mean, the CAO deals with all the like kind of most of like the staffing, the reports, all the administrative stuff, and then I deal with all the like most of the like resident constituent, like public facing things. So, and then, we talk every Tuesday morning. We have a touch base kind of meeting, and we text on a regular basis. So we're always, it's a team effort as well.
Okay. And do you wear the big thing that Sylvia used to wear, and Jack Doris?
I try not. I don't like it. It's really heavy. So the clerk will sometimes, they like me to wear it during council meetings, but I try not to.
Do you have mayor's levies, like New Year's Day levies? Does Peterborough do that?
That hasn't been done in a while. This year I went to the one at the armories.
Right.
Yeah, because there's a couple that happens, so we just thought we might as well just kind of combine them.
I would enjoy watching you in that moment in City Hall, greeting people with that thing on, being called your worship. It goes against everything, as a community builder.
Just for you.
That's funny. Thank you. I would appreciate that. Okay, so I know I have to let you go, and I have to turn it over to Lindy for questions. First of all, I'll say thank you in a minute and goodbye, but you have been amazing. I could literally talk to you for 3 more hours, and I know you're busy running a pretty substantial small municipality. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So Lindy, are there questions?
There are. So you have been talking about housing a little bit, and the first question is on that topic. So it comes from an anonymous person, and they say, "Thank you for your time, Mayor. My question is regarding the city's position on housing. There are a number of developments, in particular downtown, that are redeveloping spaces into what developers are calling luxury condominiums. As we see GTA developers continue to buy up commercial spaces, magnified
Lindy,
by..."
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. We lost Diane, so let's just.
Sorry.
I don't know. It cut me off again. Okay.
It's because it's a development question. It's probably
Yeah.
so your computer is like, no. Okay. So do you want to read the question again for her?
Sure, of course.
Up until luxury condominiums.
Okay, so I'll continue from there. As we see GTA developers continue to buy up commercial spaces, magnified by COVID, and refit them as these luxury condos, do city planners and the city have a strategy to strategize these spaces to be more attainable for citizens? And then there's another question linked to that. Are there any incentives or rules in place for developers to maintain attainable housing in the city? And how do you go about doing that? Thank you so much, and I apologize for the lengthy question.
No, it's all good. It's an important topic for sure. So at the city level, we do have some incentives for affordable housing. And again, the definition of affordable varies. Typically I think it's the federal government that define it as like 80% of market rent, but we know that market rent's gone up by like 7% in the last couple of years. So affordable isn't really that affordable. So there's some incentives that we try to provide. It's often not substantial enough for a lot of the developers whose primary goal is, isn't to provide affordable housing, but to make money. So it's difficult. Again, we're governed by the Planning Act, the Provincial Planning Act, and so if proposals are in line with that, it's sort of, we can ask them if they can put in some affordable housing, but if they refuse, we can't necessarily just turn it down. Anyways, so all that to say, there has been more work done. The federal government and their national housing strategy, which they unveiled a couple of years ago, has been really helpful. So there are some private developers that are accessing that funding. I know that originally the application process was quite onerous. So they've also, I think, worked to simplify that so that more people and smaller developers and smaller nonprofit housing providers can actually tap into that funding. So there's going to be some announcements in the next couple of weeks about some really substantial buildings that are happening that are going to be either affordable or RGI, rent geared to income developments. So, all that to say that, it's definitely something that that we think about when we're talking about downtown redevelopment, and how do we make sure that it, that there are still units that are affordable for people. I mean, the key to a healthy community is mixed incomes, mixed use buildings. So yeah, some of these developers that are talking about luxury condominiums, I think a lot of them are more market rent. Of course, that doesn't help folks that are, needing below market or geared to income. So we continue to work with private sector and as well as the nonprofit sector to try to provide that. There hasn't been a lot of that kind of housing built in a while. Peterborough Housing Corporation has a lot of plans, which are really exciting, which hopefully will be able to be more public in the next couple months as well. So I'm not sure if that totally answers the question, but
yeah, it does. Lindy, do you want to ask 2 more questions? If there are 2 more questions, then we have to let the mayor go. I'm sure she's like back to back here.
Sure. Yes, we do. So the next question I have here is, it is clear that you're passionate about many issues and working with people. Does your work ever become personal? Do you take things personally?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard not to, as somebody who, really kind of cares about the community. It can be really difficult to not sort of separate. And you have to have thick skin in this line of work for sure. But, there's been people that, will say that I'm, responsible for, the opioid crisis or like homelessness and those kinds of things. And it's just like, that kind of shit is really hard to deal with. And, I know it's not true, and there's always more that we can be doing on that front. But
the minute people say something about you or write it in a whatever those trolls do on the internet, there's something how it becomes kind of a truth.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't read social media comments like Facebook. I'm never on. Like, it's just, I don't read any of that kind of stuff because you really just can't.
Well, it goes into your psyche. It changes your psyche. I think.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, why it's a hard job for a lot of people that aren't like total sociopaths, because it's really hard to like put yourself out there and then not, take it personally when people, just really, and there's always gonna be people that don't like you and don't agree with you. Yeah, so I try, you try not to take it personally, that people just get very passionate about things. But it's definitely not easy.
One more, Lindy.
Okay, and this is fitting for the last question. What are your future aspirations?
Oh, I was going to ask it, but yes.
That's a good question. I don't even really know. Like I'm not somebody that has aspirations to do party politics. And again, part of what I like about Municipal is that it's at the grassroots level. I used to work for the provincial government, and I left that gig because I just felt like it was sort of too removed from the community. So I don't have any aspirations to do like provincial or federal politics. I'll do this for at least the next 2 years, and then we'll see.
Do you think that I'm actually going to let you go, but do you think either of the more left-leaning parties are watching you, or have there been delegations that have sort of cast a rod at you to see if
I've had conversations with the NDP for sure. And I just kind of told them like, I appreciate it, but and this was before, this was a couple years ago. And I just, so I'm sure they always are looking for, all those parties are always looking for young folks that they, that might be interested. But I can't see myself doing, enjoying being in that level of bureaucracy. And so.
Well, we're going to let you go, but I'm going to say that Sylvia Sutherland used to be my favorite mayor of Peterborough. Now you're my new favorite mayor.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do the
that's great.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you all for watching us. And next week I'm going to have Andrew Pyle on, and good luck with everything with the next year, 2 and a bit years, and with COVID. Oh my God.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'll have to come check out the market that you guys have out there.
Yeah, come out. I would love to meet you in person.
Yeah. Sounds good. With masks on.
Yes. Have a great day.
Bye. Thanks you. Thank you.